Mars or Venus? Which planet would be better for human life to populate one day? The obvious answer might be Mars, but what if I told you Venus is actually a way better option? Surprisingly, Venus has a potentially better atmosphere and less harsh gravity. On the other hand, Mars has a better surface and could potentially be terraformed. So, let's figure out which planet is really better for humans. Today, we'll walk you through 5 different categories to determine which planet is the best, Mars or Venus. But first, let's learn a little bit more about them. Astrobiologists have been looking for a way to get humans onto Mars for over 60 years now, but we still haven't set foot on the red planet. According to NASA, it's possible we could see the first human landing on Mars in the 2030s. Now, let's take a look at our other closest neighbor, Venus. Venus earned the nickname the Hell Planet because of its scorching hot temperatures. But this planet is more attractive to humans than you might think. It has an Earth-like atmosphere just 50 kilometers, 30 miles, above its surface. Venus also has 90% of the gravity we have here on Earth, while Mars only has 38%. Mars is close to us, 280 million kilometers, 175 million miles away, and we have proof of water on the planet. But too bad it's only half the size of Earth, which may present problems for population growth. Now, Venus is nearly the same size as Earth, though we're slightly larger. It's about 260 million kilometers, 160 million miles away from us, so it would take us less time to get there than to Mars. Venus's thick clouds could help protect us from solar radiation, and we'd have less trouble adjusting to the gravity. Okay, now that we know a little bit more about our planets, let's dive into our categories. Housing. One of the most important things we need to figure out if we want to populate these planets is where we would live. In 2010, NASA held a competition for Martian home designs called the 3D Printed Habitat Challenge, where competitors sent in designs for human habitats on Mars. Thanks to this, we've got plenty of ideas on how to sustain life there. Mars's atmosphere is 96% carbon dioxide, so breathing will be quite the challenge. Because of this, you'll have to rely on oxygen from your spacesuit. And due to the lack of gravity, we might get frustrated not being able to stand on our feet. Gravity helps us stay grounded, and because Mars's gravity is just over 1/3 of Earth's, you'd have to get used to skipping or hopping everywhere. So it might be fun to go for a float instead of a walk. Speaking of floating, stick around to see how floating cities are a possibility. Now, lugging building materials between Earth and Mars poses a challenge. Not only would transporting the materials be a hassle, but every time we need to run to the hardware store for more nails, it would take us 9 months to make the journey back to Earth. Because of this, it would be more effective and less expensive to use materials found on Mars. We can source things like iron, nickel, and sulfur directly on the planet. During the Habitat Design Challenge, the winning team created a home using natural and biodegradable materials. And the product was built entirely with a 3D printing machine. To make Mars habitable, automated construction would be essential. This technology is crucial because there won't be that many people on Mars when we start building infrastructure. The construction process would be long and tedious. This is Marcia, the winning creation during this design challenge. Marcia is tall, slim, and made of basalt composite, making it environmentally friendly. Inside, there are 4 levels, with separate spaces for a kitchen, sleeping quarters, and recreational activities. If we didn't end up making these structures, there are other options we could look into. Some researchers have proposed building homes below the surface of Mars, or maybe igloos to make it easier for us to create living spaces. But if I'm being honest, living in these conditions would be terrible. It would be like living in a deep, dark cave here on Earth. Except you couldn't breathe the air or go outside. Okay, let's leave Mars's dark caves behind and take a look at the options for homes on Venus. Like we said earlier, this planet is incredibly hot. So instead of living on the surface, our best option is to live 50 kilometers, 30 miles above the surface. Don't get me wrong, it would still be pretty hot up there too. The temperatures would range between 30 to 70 degrees Celsius, but nothing some breezy air conditioning couldn't fix. Our best bet would be to create communities in the stratosphere of the sky, where the temperatures are similar to what we have here on Earth. One of NASA's proposed ideas for living on Venus is called HAVOC, which stands for High Altitude Venus Operational Concept. In this model, humans would live in airships that look similar to blimps. We'd create a floating city. The material would have to be resistant to sulfuric acid, and it would be smart to have a built-in air conditioning system for when temperatures rise above what we are used to. Humans will have to make sure they never touch Venus's surface. The surface would be reserved for observation and research. Homes, roads, and bridges, everything would be built in the sky. The HAVOC would be launched onto Venus in a compressed form. Once it falls into the planet, a parachute opens up and releases once the HAVOC is fully inflated and can float without any assistance. Materials found on Venus include iron, nickel, titanium, and aluminum. Similar to Mars, we could use some of these materials to create buildings and other infrastructure on the planet. To harvest resources on this scorching hot planet, we'd need to use tools that are temperature resistant. Engineers would need to create machines that could handle the heat of Venus's atmosphere, and then transfer the resources to a location where they can cool down. The only issue is, this could be a long, drawn-out process, and it might take months until the resources are safe enough to use. When it comes to building homes, Mars for sure takes the win. Growing food. Okay. Now that the homes are figured out, humans need something to eat. The very first people on Mars or Venus better get used to the lack of food on the planet. That's not to say there won't be any food, but you can say goodbye to meat and dairy products. You'll obviously have far fewer options than in your local grocery store, because there won't be any farms or factories to put together your favorite snacks. Get used to the plant-based lifestyle when you're in space. This would be the most sustainable diet on Venus and Mars. Get used to eating fresh fruits, veggies, seeds, and nuts. We've discovered proof of water on Mars, so we could take advantage of this by using it to help us grow crops. We might even need less water to grow food than we do here on Earth. Because of Mars's 38% gravity rate, Martian soil would hold on to water much longer than what we're used to. But because of the lack of oxygen on Mars and how cold it is, we have to replicate other elements needed to make sure Earth-native plants can survive. Plants would most likely be grown in greenhouses. To increase their chances of survival, scientists may have to genetically alter them to adapt to the Martian climate. Some of our food options would be fresh fruits and vegetables that we grow, and non-perishables like pasta or canned beans that we bring from Earth. If you miss eating meat, well, pack some beef jerky. You won't have to worry about it rotting quickly like fresh meat. Your only issue would be your limited supply. I'm eating that stuff in a week. Venus is a bit of a different story. If we follow our floating cities plan, the hot surface temperature of the planet won't kill our growing plants, but we'd still have to watch out for acid rain. Another issue with Venus is that there's no proof of water on the planet. To grow food there, we'd need to use the greenhouse method again, but we'd need to create water from scratch. This sounds more intricate than it is, but with the right resources, it's possible. To create water, All you need is 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. First, add heat to break apart the atoms, and then they bond together to create water. Although we can make water from scratch, so far we haven't found a way to create it in large quantities. Hopefully, by the time humans get to Venus, we'll have figured it out. Humans will be dependent on lab-grown foods. So similar to Mars, Venus would have lots of leafy greens and foods less likely to perish, but the delivery methods would be different. Because of the similar temperatures on Venus and the knowledge of water creation, Venus takes the win in this round. Exploration. Now let's talk about how we'll get around once we're living on these planets. One thing we already know is that moving around on Mars is possible. Just take a look at Curiosity, Perseverance, and the other rovers that have been exploring the planet for decades now. If these robots can navigate the rocky terrain, there's no doubt humans can too. Researchers have even designed spacesuits made specifically for Mars. These suits would be lighter and would offer greater mobility. However, the one thing that would slow you down is the dust. Mars is home to some of the most powerful dust storms in the solar system, and the planet's atmosphere is just 1% the thickness of Earth's. If a dust storm were to happen, you'd need to get inside immediately or risk damaging your equipment, or worse, your lungs. As for transportation, Mars would likely have electric-powered rovers or vehicles to get around. The dusty terrain might pose a challenge, but with sufficient technology, road systems could be implemented. Now let's hop over to Venus. Getting around on Venus is going to be quite a bit more complex. Since we would be living in airships, travel would most likely consist of smaller air transport vehicles. Think of hot air balloons or drones carrying people from one part of the city to the other. But here's the kicker. If you fall, you're doomed. That's right. Falling from your blimp to the surface would be like falling into a pizza oven. You'd need safety harnesses, solid parachutes, and protocols in place to ensure no one ever accidentally drops something or someone. Engineers would need to figure out how to create magnetic fields or some sort of stabilization system to keep everything level. Even exploring Venus's surface will be nearly impossible due to the extreme pressure and heat. Previous probes sent to Venus, like the Soviet Venera missions, were crushed or melted within minutes. So human exploration would be limited to aerial surveys and maybe robotic missions, at least for the foreseeable future. Winner for exploration? Mars again. The environment is less deadly and more accessible for both robots and humans. Terraforming potential. Let's move on to something even more futuristic, terraforming. This is the idea of turning a planet into something similar to Earth, so we can live on it more comfortably. Mars has been the main focus for terraforming ideas. Scientists have proposed releasing greenhouse gases like CO2 to warm up the planet. This could potentially bring the temperature up enough to melt the polar ice caps and release water vapor, thickening the atmosphere. Eventually, with enough effort, plants could be introduced to produce oxygen. But here's the problem. Mars has no magnetic field, so solar winds would keep stripping away any atmosphere we manage to create. Not to mention, it would take centuries, maybe millennia, for full terraforming to make Mars truly Earth-like. Now, terraforming Venus would be even trickier. First, you'd need to get rid of its thick carbon dioxide atmosphere, which traps heat and causes the planet's extreme greenhouse effect. Some scientists have proposed using giant space mirrors to reflect sunlight away from the planet, cooling it down. Others have talked about sending in microorganisms that could convert CO2 into something more useful. But to be honest, terraforming Venus would be an engineering nightmare. You'd have to lower the temperature by hundreds of degrees, change the atmospheric pressure, and somehow eliminate the clouds of sulfuric acid. So, while both are difficult, Mars has a slight edge because it's already cold and dry. Venus is way too extreme. Mars wins again. Resource availability. Next up, let's look at resources. What can we use on each planet to survive and build our future? Mars has polar ice caps, which means water is available, though it might be frozen or underground. Water is not just for drinking. It can also be broken down into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen for breathing. Mars also has minerals like iron, nickel, magnesium, and silica that can be used for construction and tools. We've also discovered perchlorates in Martian soil. While toxic to humans, perchlorates can be used to make oxygen and rocket fuel with the right processing. Solar energy would work on Mars too, although the dust could block sunlight, making energy production inconsistent. On Venus, the surface is bone dry and extremely hot. Water is virtually non-existent, and extracting it from the atmosphere would be difficult. However, Venus's atmosphere is rich in CO2 and nitrogen, and there's sulfuric acid in the clouds. These chemicals could be harvested for fuel or industrial processes, but not for basic human survival. And while there may be metals like titanium and iron, getting them from the surface would be like mining inside a volcano. Not very practical. So, again, Mars wins when it comes to usable resources. Long-term sustainability. Finally, we have to ask, which planet offers better long-term prospects for a self-sustaining civilization? Mars, while cold and dusty, has relatively stable conditions. You can build underground or dome habitats, use solar or nuclear energy, grow plants in greenhouses, and slowly work towards making the planet more habitable. Gravity is low but not zero, so long-term effects on the human body would need to be studied. Radiation is a major concern, so habitats would need to be shielded or buried. But the idea of creating a self-sustaining Martian colony isn't science fiction anymore. It's a legitimate goal for the coming decades. Venus, on the other hand, is unpredictable and extreme. Any mistake with altitude or equipment and you're toast, literally. There's no land to farm, no easy way to get water, and the constant risk of acidic corrosion. Yes, living in the sky sounds cool, but maintaining floating cities above a burning death world is risky business. Long-term sustainability would require massive investments, advanced technology, and luck. So for long-term living, Mars wins again. Conclusion. So let's tally it up. Housing, Mars wins. Exploration, Mars wins. Terraforming, Mars wins. Resources, Mars wins. Long-term sustainability, Mars wins. That's a clean sweep for the red planet. Sorry, Venus lovers, maybe in a few more centuries. But hey, just because Mars wins for now, doesn't mean Venus is out of the picture forever. With future advancements in technology, who knows? Floating cities above Venus might become the luxury resorts of the 25th century. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through our neighboring planets and want more mind-blowing space and science content, don't forget to like this video, share it with your curious friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more fascinating what-if scenarios every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep looking up because the universe has endless stories to tell.